Hello and welcome to the Out of Frame Behind the Scenes podcast. I'm your host, Paul Nelson, filling in for Sean Malone. And as always, I'm joined by Jen Mafasanti, the communications director for the Libertas Institute. And I feel like Sean and I are playing a game of new school telephone. We haven't been at the studio at the same time for, I guess going on a month and a half. Yeah. I just keep missing him. But fun facts. We just got back from the Fee Retreat, or the Fee Treat, as I like to call it. But saw Jen in person for the first time in over a year. We got together with the whole Fee organization and just got to reconnect, hash out some new ideas. And I don't know, Jen, what was your biggest takeaway from this retreat?
Wow, my biggest takeaway. It's always so incredible to me how international Fee is.
Yeah.
We had people from all over the United States there at the retreat, but also from Mexico and from Guatemala. And Fee's president is Canada, and Fee's is Lithuania, and just all over the world. It was really incredible to have all of those people in the same room at the same time, just all working towards making the world a better place. It's great. It's great.
And some of you might not know, but we have a Fee in Espanol branch of Fee that does our content in Spanish, and it's for a Latin American audience. And something that's been happening that I think is just absolutely amazing is that we are hosting programs in Venezuela, and we're starting to get pictures from young people flying the Fee flag, which you can find at our store, on the streets of Venezuela, which blows my mind. It's
incredible. It is incredible. I am so proud to be a part of this organization. I'm so proud of those kids in Venezuela, like daring to say, no, this is not right. And we're going to talk about what is. Yeah. And it's so great. So great.
It's great. And I'm awestruck by, honestly, just their bravery. It takes a lot to do something like that in a place like that. And like you said, I'm just so proud to be part of an organization that is helping them find their voice and giving them the tools to communicate the ideas of freedom in a place that has obviously turned the complete opposite direction. And on a much lighter note, something that came out of the Fee Retreat is we want to start doing some new products. And one of those is video game streaming, which, after talking about what's going on in Venezuela, transitioning to this, it makes you realize how lucky we are to be in a place like the United States. But we're right after this podcast, myself and Pavel, our producer, we're gonna start doing a little test. We're going to hop on some Call of Duty, get the stuff, the tech side figured out, and hopefully in the next few weeks you'll see not only my face but Pavel playing some video games, talking about freedom, talking with you guys in the comments. But I also want to get all the other people in Fee from our content team with Brad Palumbo, Hannah Cox, to our people down in Latin America, and just really introduce everyone to the whole team and just show a little bit more of a personal side to our organization. So I'm pretty excited about that. The one thing that I was a little disappointed in the Fee Retreat is that we didn't have any vodka martinis. Shaken, not stirred.
And it's better that way, because that's not how you should make a martini.
Jen has strong feelings about martinis.
I do. I have strong opinions. Shocker.
It's in her name. But I think that's a great transition to the movie we're talking about today, James Bond, No Time to Die. This is the 25th installment in the James Bond franchise, the last movie for Daniel Craig's Bond. It's a time of transition. And we'll get into a lot of things. There are actually some out of frame. You know, the whole thing about out of frame is bringing together culture and big ideas. And there's actually quite a few ideas in here that we want to talk about, which surprised me. Usually James Bond movies are pretty. There's a bad
Pretty
guy that
thin
needs
on
stopping.
that front. Yeah.
But Jen, can you give us a quick synopsis of No Time to Die?
Oh my goodness. So James Bond is enjoying retirement in Jamaica, which honestly, that's a great place to enjoy retirement, as far as I'm concerned. He's just there living his best life, only to be contacted by his old CIA friend Felix, which we met in Casino Royale. He's a great character. Love him to bits. So Felix is like, listen, man, we lost a scientist and we got to get him back. Oh, okay, fine. We'll get this done because it involves Spectre somehow. And that is just really all you need to say to James Bond in order to get him on board. So they go to Cuba to rescue this scientist, but it is revealed that this is a much bigger game than Bond was led to believe. There are nanobots involved. We've got weapons of mass destruction. It's only trying to save the world. So then, the fun and games happen.
Yeah.
James Bond doing James Bond things.
So we will get into spoilers. So there are some spoilers for this one. Normally we talk about like what's really a spoiler. There's legitimate spoilers in this, and so if you don't want to have the ending of No Time to Die spoiled, go ahead and pause it. Run to your local theater. It's 2 hours and 45 minutes, so it's not a short time commitment. But come back and you'll hear us talk about it. But yeah, so what did you think of this movie? What was your initial reaction after coming out of the theater?
So I loved this movie. I thought it was a magnificent send-off for Daniel Craig's James Bond. There were so many wonderful little nods to previous James Bond movies, kind of all of them, honestly, just from the settings and other locations to just the way certain scenes were shot and all that good stuff. It wasn't like an in-your-face member-berry fest like you would see in Ready Player One or anything like that. It was very subtle. It made sense in the context of the story that they were telling right then. And I think that is just a wonderful way to do that sort of homage to the idea of James Bond altogether. And it was a good James Bond movie. I got emotional at the end and I cried a little bit, which, I mean, for me, let's be honest, low bar, but still, like, I had feelings. It was great.
Well, that's what movies are meant to do, is elicit feelings. I agree with you to a point. I thought this was a good movie. I do have a little bit of quibbles with it, mainly with the villain, just his motivation. But I thought the performances were great. I mean, Daniel Craig always is just he's just a great James Bond. He brings that physical nature to the role that you need. He obviously very suave gentleman. But at the end of the movie, I was thinking I should be feeling emotional about this, but at that point, the villain's motivations had been revealed, and I was just left wondering why we were doing this. It just felt a little, I don't want to say rushed, because this movie is 2 hours and 45 minutes, but it felt like they said to themselves, we have Rami Malek, we're going to make him a creepy, weird, bad guy, which this role was, I feel like Rami Malek was born to play a Bond villain. But
absolutely,
his motivations did not make sense. So with that, we'll get into, this will be the spoiler heavy section of the movie. And I want to start back to the best part of the movie, in my opinion. That is
it Paloma?
It is Paloma, Ana de Armas. She is a U.S. asset who
Yeah, seems to be.
James Bond meets up with in Cuba to find the scientist that is making the nanobots. And she is just magnificent. She is by far the standout performance. And she was only on screen for 30 minutes. And as soon as she left, the movie missed her. She needed to be
Yeah.
in this movie more. She was funny. She was charming. Her action scenes were fantastic. It set her character. It was just a beautiful way of setting her character up, and the interplay between Daniel Craig and De Armas was really good. And there was more chemistry there in those scenes than I feel like there was more in chemistry with people he should be in love with, which was funny.
You're not wrong.
It felt.
I mean, she was outstanding. She really was the standout character in this film, and I want to see an entire franchise based around her because she's just a delight.
It was great, and that was the highlight for the movie for me. But I think where the out of frame stuff comes in is the MacGuffin they're chasing, which is this nanobite technology. So this technology was stolen at the beginning of the movie by Spectre, and this technology can basically target a single person's DNA with a quick-acting smallpox and a deadly some kind of disease.
Is some kind of disease. It's very disease-like.
You die in a gruesome, painful way, and that's stolen. That sets off the worldwide chase, as a Bond movie does. And as we get through James Bond is unraveling this tale of why does this thing even exist? What does the MI6 have to do with it? And why are they not talking to the CIA? And that's where Felix comes in, who is a CIA agent. But it turns out that Mallory, has been developing this technology in secret using government funds for the UK to use as a weapon. Well, it started out as something totally different. And as usual, there are unintended consequences. And
shocker.
So, Jen, can you talk a little bit about that? Government's creating something that they think will be good, but in the end would be used to kill most of the human population.
Well, this nanobot technology was designed to be able to be really, really targeted in who it affected, but the dispersal of it didn't need to be like that sniper precise. Like, you could blanket an entire city with these nanobots that had been programmed to just this one person's DNA, and only that one person would die. And it's horrific, but I can also appreciate the intent behind that development. All right. The problem comes in that in order to be able to program it to one specific person's DNA, you have to be able to program it to anyone's DNA. So that opens up a really huge opportunity for this sort of weapon to be misused. And I'm sure that when they were developing this, they're like, well, it would never fall into enemies' hands. It would never be used by anybody who wasn't hyper targeted and who they wanted to take out. Which, I mean, first of all, government's just assassinating people in general is just bad business. And that's a different conversation for maybe a different day. But the arrogance involved in thinking that this weapon would never be used for any other purpose than what it was originally intended is something that we see over and over and over again, just from governments all over the world, all of the time. And it's not limited just to weapons, okay? I mean, governments develop weapons so that they can kill people more efficiently, all right? That's horrible. But this also happens with just like really well-intentioned policy efforts
Mm-hmm.
and regulation and just really anything that government does. They tend to think that it will, they implement it with the idea that it will only do what they intended it to do, what they wanted. And then are shocked when all of these negative downstream effects happen that they didn't intend to happen. So we're back to the self-explanatory unintended consequences. But it happens every time. And every time officials act so surprised that it happened that way. Like, man, do you guys even watch the show?
Right. That part really struck me. That being
it was a very real moment.
It was. And it took James Bond back because he trusted M. He has been working with him, I assume, his whole career. And he thought he should know better and said as much in a James Bond way. And you see, like Jen, you see this all the time with unintended consequences. And it's the idea that you can centrally plan anything. And we've seen this with the war on drugs, war on poverty, war on terror. There's just unintended consequences that lead up to stuff that we're still dealing with today in a very real way that I'm sure the people that made those pieces of legislation did not intend to happen. So even if you have the best intentions, you have to remember that incentives are real, and bureaucracy follows incentives. They're not just above human feelings, human passions. When you give people power, they're usually going to use it. And I thought this movie showed that pretty well.
Absolutely. And that's a topic that we've talked about over and over and over again on this show. And because it remains relevant. Like, that is just an evergreen subject that we're going to be able to come back to time and time again. And it appears in pop culture. So clearly people understand that this is a thing, and yet it keeps happening on the governmental level. And that is never going to change unless we adjust the incentive structure that officials are working under. You know, they're going to need to face consequences for their mistakes. They're going to need to have their power restricted so that there's really only so much they can do to screw things up like this, you know? And yet that also doesn't change. So that's why we have jobs, right?
Right. So I want to move into the big villain in this movie, Rami Malek's character, Safin. I hope I'm saying that right. I only heard it like once or twice in the movie, and it was kind of muffled. So he.
You know what? Let's just call him Rami Malek. Let's just go with that. It'll be fine.
He played himself, I feel like.
Kind
of. So his character, we are introduced to him at the very beginning of the movie. He's walking towards this isolated house in the middle of Norway. He is going to find a Spectre agent and kill him. But when he gets there, he finds just his wife and daughter, and he ends up murdering the wife and actually saving the daughter from drowning or freezing to death in a frozen lake. So fast forward 20 years, I guess. He's off screen.
Unclear.
We pick up with James Bond in Jamaica, and we've talked about the plot. The MacGuffin is they're chasing after it, but the threads connect when James Bond's love interest, Madeline, is revealed to be the little girl that Rami Malek saved at the beginning of the movie. So Madeline is the only connection between Rami Malek and this nanobot technology, and he uses that sway over her of saving her life to force her, basically, to extort her to do what he wants, which is first take out Spectre and second get this nanobot technology. The Raimi's family is also. It's then revealed that Raimi's family at the beginning of the movie was poisoned and killed. His entire family. He's the only one that survived, and that has led him on. That had deformed his face. He wore a mask at the beginning to hide his deformities, but he wants to take out the entire Spectre organization, and he uses the nanobot technology to do that. That all checks out with me. That makes sense. Crazy guy, his family was killed by Spectre. He wants revenge. But that's where it breaks down for me after that. He then takes the same nanobot technology and for some reason wants to kill James Bond, even though James Bond, in theory, would have similar motivations to take out Spectre, and then also wants to use it to kill most of humanity. And I know this is a James Bond movie, so we have to have a world-ending threat. But we've talked about this before. The best villains are so important, and their motivations have to be clear. And you think throughout movie history of the best villains, you usually understand their motivations. And this, for me, this movie could have been great, but it falls short of that because of how bad the intentions of Rami Malek's character were. They just didn't add up. And I don't know if you have a different take on that, but it really, that little third act, when you're talking about the big spoiler, I was left thinking, well, why are we doing this? Why is all of this happening? Because they kind of muddled his whole evil scheme. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. Rami Malek's character was not well developed. It was not at all clear why he was doing what he was doing after a certain point. And it made the ending, the third act, a little muddled, a little confusing. It just felt like some of these things were happening because that's what the script said. Which is why I made the caveat when I was talking about my impressions of the movie that this was a great James Bond movie, not necessarily a great movie. So there was that. But then I had also kind of, I think, in my own brain, decided that the actual villain was MI6, not Rami Malek. Rami Malek was just like a catalyst for all of this. And he's crazy, so he gets to do crazy things. But none of this would have been possible if it hadn't been for MI6 and M developing that nanobot technology and getting it to the point of viability. So I think that's where I went with it in my own head in order to suspend the necessary disbelief, to get through and enjoy the third act for what it was. So that's my thoughts on it.
Mm-hmm. And I'm saying all this, like Jen said, this was a good James Bond movie. The action was great. The shots were beautiful. You could tell that no expense was spared to bring this to the screen. And I had a lot of fun. Like I said, with the scene in Cuba with Ana de Armas, I'm thinking, I almost said Ana de Paloma, which getting her character's name and her name. That's just James Bond at its best. But thinking about MI6 as the villain, which they are, but they get scot-free per usual. That does soften the hard edges a little bit. So now we'll get into, speaking of the third act, we're going to get into the big spoilers. So they have to infiltrate an isolated island. Surprise, surprise! It's James Bond.
Surprise, surprise!
With the
with the Soviet missile base. Let's not forget that
shut down Soviet missile base and so James Bond joins up with the new 007, which a lot of noise has been in the Twitterverse about this, and honestly, it's just noise because I thought they actually handled this really well. It was a very interesting dynamic and a very real to life, I feel like, dynamic of somebody that's been in a role a long time and then is just gone. and then comes back all of a sudden. It's weird, and I thought it was actually well done, handled well. I had no
I
complaints.
agree. I agree. Like, people making a big stink about this, I don't think actually watched the movie.
Yeah, yeah. It felt like it was a lot of like the director and some of the actors. It felt like they were just pushing buttons to get press, which it's a strategy.
Hey, it works. We
Yeah,
we made like a whole episode about it, didn't we?
yeah. So I mean, it works. So they infiltrate this base to stop Rami Malek from obviously killing humanity. They, surprise, succeed. But in the course of this, James Bond is left stranded on the island with 9 cruise missiles incoming to destroy the base before they could get the nanobot technology off the island and shipped worldwide. What and I this is might be the what we would need to jump back to this. Madeline, who's James Bond's love interest, they had a falling out years before because he thought she betrayed him, and turned out they had a daughter together, and that whole dynamic was in the undercurrent. They had been kidnapped by Raimi, and they had since escaped, but it was James Bond trying to save the world, save his relationship with his love interest, and now his daughter, but also save himself and his mental health. He was obviously struggling with a lot of demons throughout his whole run as James Bond, but in particular this. And at the end, he decided to save the day and stay behind and die instead of having to go back, because he was sprayed in the last battle with Raimi with the DNA of his wife and daughter. So if he ever touched them, they would die instantly. So knowing that he would have a life of just as much distance as possible from the people he loved, he decided to sacrifice himself for the good of the world. And Daniel Craig's run as Bond is now over. But this is also the first time they've killed James Bond.
Yeah, it is.
And that really does lead me to the question of, should they have killed James Bond?
Well, here's the thing with killing James Bond. This leaves a very convenient way to just not make any more and go in a different direction. Just like stop making James Bonds. 25 movies. That's a very, nice round number there. They could stop. And I don't think anybody would blame them for that, really. It's a great setup for that. It also leaves the opportunity to go in a completely different direction with James Bond. There's been a fan theory for years that James Bond as a character was never intended to be a single person, a single man. It was just a persona that was swapped from agent to agent as time went on and the world changed, and various James Bonds got old and wanted to retire. So that's been a fan theory about James Bond for a long time, and this provides the perfect opportunity to make that canon, as it were. But, I don't hate that they killed James Bond here. I think you had hints that those were the actual stakes throughout the entire movie. When Felix died, for example, that was like a big blow. Like, oh, it's not just random nameless extras that are getting the axe in this one. We've got named characters who we have like strong opinions about who are dying off. And so I think that was a really good escalation of the stakes. And I had this sense throughout the entire third act and part of the end of the second act too, that he could die in this one. Yeah. Like, this feels a lot more real for James Bond than it has in any other installments. I'm legitimately concerned for how he's going to get out of this. And then he did not get out of this.
Just stood there.
It's like he made a choice.
Yeah, he made a choice.
This was not him just, he failed, It was not just like, well, that's the only option left. Like, he decided that was how he was going to go out. And I respect the choice. I respect it.
Yeah. I think this kind of goes to the point, like Rami Malek's his intentions, his plan. I feel like I should have been hit more in the feelings more than I was. So his daughter had a little stuffed animal that she dropped in the base, and while he was trying to go back and save the day, he found it and picked it up. And then it was kind of not seen again. I was really expecting him to have a moment where he is holding that little bunny and looking at his daughter from a distance growing up, and that would have torn me apart. But
yeah,
it was not paid off on. And I don't know. I don't know if they should have killed him. It makes sense with this script that they did. The third act just was not that well put together, so it just felt a little not that big of a sacrifice, to be honest. The whole situation was pretty contained. They had pretty much dispatched of every single henchman that Rami Malek had, and the only person that seemed to be left alive was Rami himself, which leads to the next question about the main fight between James Bond and Rami at the end. But it just felt a little lackluster to me, which surprised me because the whole movie, it was building to this climax of, he's going to have a choice to make at the end of this, and which way is he going to go. But you wanted to talk about this, and I know you have very strong feelings about this movie trope and just this idea in general. But in the end fight between Rami Malek and James Bond, when Rami sprays him with the Kool-Aid that is going to, if he touches his daughter and a wife, lover, that they would instantly kill him because it's the nanobite stuff. And Rami says to James Bond, "You made me do this." And we see this a lot in TV and movies, this line and this idea that that somebody else made you do something. And I know you have strong feelings about this, so I'm just going to give you the floor.
All right. This is a very common trope, and it's a common trope because a lot of people do actually think this way. All right. They blame their own actions on externalities and outside influences, and they just don't take responsibility for what they themselves have chosen to do. And it's crap. It is a hugely unhealthy way of looking at the world. There is a difference between being at fault for something and being responsible for something. Rami Malek's circumstances were not his fault. He was a child. His parents made decisions. They did work that was not super awesome, but that was their choice. Spectre made a choice when they came in and just murdered all of them. None of those things were his fault. But he used that as an excuse for all of his behavior after that. It's not my fault. They made me do it. They are the ones who created this monster that you see before you. And no, honey, that's not how any of this works, actually. The circumstances were not your fault, but how you respond to them is your responsibility. And they are not the reason for the monster that we see before us. You are the reason for the monster that we see before us. You made choices too, after all of this. And what have you wrought? Like, what
Mm-hmm.
was this worth it? Like, to foist all of your sense of responsibility onto other people who you ultimately have no control over?
Mm-hmm.
You cannot go through your life thinking about the world that way and come out the other end a healthy, happy, functioning human being. This is how atrocities happen. This is how the worst individual actors in the entire world come to be, is that they foist responsibility for their own actions onto other people.
That's well said, and I would agree with that 100%. And so I feel like we've talked about this movie in particular a lot. So I guess I'll ask you quickly: would you recommend this? I feel like I know the answer already, but
Yeah, I would, but only if you're actually a James Bond fan. Like, just the subtle touches in this movie that make it so marvelous for me is because I spent a lot of my childhood and like teen years watching old James Bond movies with like my siblings and my cousins, and that was something special that we shared. And so I have that lore in the back of my head going into every single James Bond movie that I watch. And if you're not into James Bond, you're not going to get all of that. And it's without that, it's just a slick action movie with a villain that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
but
So
but slick
that's what
action
I would say.
yeah, slick action movies are fun.
Yeah.
I think knowing James Bond and liking James Bond and watch especially Daniel Craig's movies, I think will help with the with understanding this particular Bond's motivations. I would recommend this. I would also recommend to go see this in a theater. I think this is
Yes.
you will have a blast seeing this on the big screen. Obviously, you can watch it at home when it comes out, but this is one of those movies where it's just better in that setting. And also just go watch it to see Anna de Armas kick some butt and
Yeah.
be
She's so great.
best part of the movie. Need more. And so, okay, I feel like you kind of answered this already, but I want to. I'm not going to ask you to rank all 25 James Bond movies,
Oh,
but
God.
where can you give you like, is this tier A, tier S, or tier F? Where is this on the tier list for you?
Uh, this is top 5. Easy.
Okay.
License to Kill will always have like a special place in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily because it's one of the better Bond movies, but because it's the first one that I ever watched.
Right.
So there's that. And then I don't know, man.
I mean,
Goldfinger, good one.
yeah.
I would also put Casino Royale up there. I don't know, like I can't explain why that's a really good one for me, but because there's a distinct lack of gadgets and it's a lot more cerebral. But I love Casino
Yeah.
Royale too, so I'm gonna say it's A tier. It's A tier.
A tier.
I don't have any S tiers.
Yeah.
For James Bond. Really.
Octopussy didn't make the S tier.
No,
Okay, that's fine.
it's just this for me. There's no incorrect ranking for James Bond movies. Is the thing.
Right. I enjoyed this movie. It's probably I'm not a huge James Bond buff by any stretch of the imagination. They all kind of run together. But what I think is really interesting about James Bond is that even though we have these crazy tech gadgets and all this stuff that's become synonymous with the character, it's always kind of a time capsule for the time that the movie was made. And it's just so fascinating to even go back to like Sean Connery's through the 70s, 80s, 90s. Each of these it's how society viewed that kind of person, which is licensed to kill, can do whatever they want. And you see a definitive shift in that tone from the 60s all the way to today, and I'm sure the future. But and like even in the technology, it's just the idea of where the world is as far as they're thinking through the future and what Q is giving to James Bond. Like this one, it's EMP watches that blows up eyes. I mean, EMPs are a big talking point this day and age with just our power grid. But then you just go back to just the early stuff, and it's very different. And I always find that I always really appreciate that about the old James Bond movies. It's just a little slice of time, almost, in an over-the-top way. So with that, we're going to end it there. Thank you so much for watching. We're going to continue talking about James Bond adjacent issues in the supporters section. But if you could you give us, just go to wherever you guys listen to your podcast, give us a rating, leave a comment. It helps us out. We want more people to listen to this. And, as always, follow us on all the social media. We got a lot of stuff coming. Like I said at the beginning of the podcast, some video game content. So if you're interested in that stuff, hit us up. Let us know what you want to see. Join the Discord. We'll be there. But in the meantime, if you want to hear us talk about James Bond and maybe the CCP, go on over to Patreon or Subscribestar and join us there, and we'll be talking about that. So with that, thank you so much for listening or watching, and we'll see you next time.